Patrol cars rolled up my driveway, gravel crunching beneath their tires. The entire HOA board went still, frozen mid-motion. Karen dropped the gavel like it burned her hand. One of the guys in a lawn chair slowly stood up, eyes wide, as reality set in. I stared in disbelief as the chaos unfolded outside our modest home in Cedar Heights. That day, nothing was going to be the same. Cedar Heights was the kind of neighborhood where order was sacred and rules were carved in stone. Every lawn was immaculate, every mailbox perfectly aligned, and the local homeowners association, HOA, enforced its guidelines with an iron fist. In this meticulously maintained community, individuality was seen as a disruption, and those who dared deviate from the norm were quickly and ruthlessly punished. At the center of this rigid system was Karen Miller, a woman in her early 50s whose reputation as HOA Karen was known throughout Cedar Heights. Dressed in tailored suits and armed with a clipboard and smartphone, Karen patrolled the neighborhood with a hawk's eye for detail. To her, every stray flower, every slightly crooked fence post, was an affront to the pristine order of our community. Her relentless enforcement had earned her both fear and disdain among residents. I, on the other hand, had grown up in Cedar Heights with a spirit that chafed under such control. My father had long been a pillar of the community, known for his integrity and hardworking nature. When I inherited our family home and the small patch of land behind it, I vowed to honor that legacy by embracing both tradition and progress. I set up a modest farm stand on our property, selling fresh produce, homemade jams, and the occasional seasonal treat to share with our neighbors. It was a humble enterprise, born out of love for local living and self-sufficiency. My pride and joy, however, wasn't just our family business. It was my son, Jason. Quiet and unassuming, Jason had grown up learning the value of hard work and community spirit. He was the kind of kid who always had a kind word for everyone, and he took pride in helping out at the farm stand whenever he could. What many didn't know was that Jason's calm demeanor masked a formidable strength and a keen sense of justice inherited from his father. Cedar Heights, despite its picture-perfect exterior, had always simmered with underlying tensions. The HOA's uncompromising standards had stifled creativity, and many residents felt increasingly oppressed by constant surveillance and arbitrary fines. For me, the farm stand was not just a business. It was a symbol of independence, a quiet rebellion against a system that demanded conformity. Little did I know that an incident involving fake HOA enforcers was about to test our family's resolve in ways we never expected, a test that would reveal secrets about power, privilege, and the true meaning of justice. It all began on an unusually crisp autumn afternoon. I was closing up the farm stand when I noticed a commotion at the edge of our property. A group of individuals, dressed in what looked like outdated security uniforms bearing the insignia of the HOA, were gathering near our driveway. I initially assumed they were there to conduct a routine inspection, as Karen had been known to schedule unscheduled audits of residents' properties. But as I drew closer, my heart sank. These enforcers weren't wearing the standard badges issued by our local law enforcement. They looked fake, mismatched, and, more disturbingly, they were brandishing warrants and arrest orders that cited obscure HOA violations. I couldn't believe my eyes when one of them, a man with a stern, unyielding expression, read out that my son Jason was wanted for disturbing the community peace and defying HOA standards. I rushed inside and dialed my phone, my pulse racing as I tried to understand what was happening. It turned out that Karen, ever vigilant and hungry for control, had somehow managed to conspire with a few opportunistic individuals posing as HOA enforcers. They had devised a bogus operation to arrest Jason on trumped-up charges meant to send a message to anyone who dared defy the rigid rules of Cedar Heights. It was a setup designed to intimidate, to enforce compliance by fear. I grabbed the security camera footage from that afternoon. The video clearly showed these fake enforcers arriving in a battered van, huddling around a clipboard and coordinating in hushed, urgent tones. They marched toward Jason, who had just finished closing up the stand, and in a scene that unfolded like something out of a bad movie, they attempted to detain him right there on our property. Jason, though surprised, kept his cool. With a mix of youthful determination and the calm authority of someone who had been raised to stand up for what's right, he resisted their futile attempts to arrest him. He explained in measured tones that he was simply helping at the family stand, that there was no law being broken. His composed demeanor, however, only infuriated the impostors. They persisted, and in the midst of this farce, I heard the distant sound of sirens growing louder. The drama reached a fever pitch when the fake enforcers began to roughhouse with Jason, their tactics growing increasingly aggressive. I knew something had to be done. If these imposters succeeded in intimidating my son, it would be a devastating blow not only to our family, but to the very spirit of Cedar Heights. My anger boiled over, and I confronted the group, demanding that they explain themselves. But before I could get a word in, one of the enforcers produced a crumpled document and began reading out loud the nonsensical charges, his voice echoing in the quiet street. I could feel the eyes of our neighbors on me, their expressions a mixture of shock and curiosity. Many had witnessed the commotion, and soon snippets of the scene began circulating on social media. The digital evidence was undeniable. These were not legitimate officers. They were fake enforcers orchestrated by Karen to further her campaign of control. Furious and determined to protect my family's honor, I immediately gathered all the evidence. I printed out the security footage, saved screenshots of the messages from the imposters, and collected statements from neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. I was determined to expose the farce and hold Karen accountable for her abuse of power. As I prepare my digital dossier, I also reached out to a trusted friend in the local police department. Within minutes, a real patrol car arrived, and genuine officers took control of the situation. They quickly disarmed the fake enforcers and began questioning everyone involved. My son Jason, standing tall and calm amid the chaos, explained the entire setup with clarity that left little room for doubt. The real police confirmed that no legal basis existed for the arrest, and that the individuals were indeed imposters using fake badges and documents. The incident quickly escalated from a personal family matter to a community-wide scandal. Neighbors began sharing their own stories of harassment and arbitrary fines imposed by the HOA. The digital petition demanding Karen's accountability started gathering signatures by the thousands. What began as a staged arrest attempt was now a symbol of the oppressive overreach that many in Cedar Heights had silently endured for years. Every piece of evidence added to the growing chorus of voices calling for reform. I updated the community forum with videos, photos, and a detailed account of the entire event. The narrative was clear. An overzealous enforcer had used a sham operation to intimidate a young man who was simply living his life. The story resonated with many who felt trapped by the rigid rules of Cedar Heights, and it wasn't long before the call for a thorough investigation reached a boiling point. In the days following the incident, Cedar Heights was ablaze with outrage. Social media platforms lit up with video clips of the fake enforcer's attempt, with hashtags such as #NotMyNeighborhood, #FakeEnforcers, and #JusticeForJason trending among residents. The digital evidence that I had compiled was shared widely, and soon every discussion in neighborhood groups revolved around this blatant abuse of power. Local news outlets swung into action. Reporters gathered outside our home and the community center, interviewing shocked residents and local officials. This is a clear case of harassment by individuals masquerading as law enforcement, one anchor stated on live television. The community is demanding answers and accountability from the HOA, which has long been criticized for its arbitrary fines and overreach. The story, initially sparked by Karen's attempt to intimidate my son, quickly became a symbol of the broader struggle for individual rights in Cedar Heights. Within the HOA board, the internal pressure grew palpable. Emergency meetings were held behind closed doors, and leaked minutes revealed heated arguments among board members. Some longtime members, who had once staunchly supported Karen's strict enforcement, began to question whether her actions were in the best interests of the community. This is not about upholding standards. It's about bullying, one board member was overheard saying during a meeting. The digital evidence, combined with the public outcry, left many with no choice but to confront the reality of Karen's personal vendetta. I continued to build momentum by sharing my digital dossier on various online platforms. Neighbors contributed their own testimonies, and influential local bloggers picked up the story, framing it as a turning point for Cedar Heights. When the law is twisted to serve personal grudges, the entire community suffers, one blogger wrote, echoing the sentiment of many who had grown weary of the HOA's oppressive tactics. The tension escalated further when the real police issued an official statement, confirming that the individuals who tried to arrest my son were imposters using counterfeit badges and documents. This statement not only validated my claims, but also undermined the legitimacy of Karen's actions. The police urged residents to come forward with any further evidence of misconduct, signaling that the investigation was far from over. As the digital petitions soared and more residents voiced their support, the HOA board was forced to announce a final public hearing to address the controversy. The announcement was met with thunderous applause in community forums and on social media. In the days leading up to the hearing, residents organized meetings, distributed flyers, and even held peaceful rallies demanding that the board reform its policies and hold those responsible for the intimidation accountable. The tension in Cedar Heights had reached a fever pitch. Every day, I received messages from residents, some expressing gratitude for exposing the injustice, others sharing their own experiences of arbitrary fines. The community's unity was now undeniable, and the collective voice demanded that the HOA board take action, not only against Karen, but also to ensure that no other family would have to endure such humiliation. I continued to update my digital dossier, adding new footage, updated testimonies, and even expert analysis that confirmed the legality of the actions taken by the real police. The unified message was clear: our community would no longer tolerate the abuse of power disguised as law enforcement. The battle lines were drawn, and Cedar Heights was ready to redefine its future. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp morning at the Cedar Heights Community Center, where the final public hearing was underway. The boardroom was filled with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a sea of determined residents, all gathered to decide the fate of our neighborhood's enforcement policies. With calm authority and unwavering resolve, Councilwoman Emily Johnson stepped up to the podium. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, detailed logs of the attempted arrest, and the heartfelt testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Johnson began, her voice steady and powerful. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, specifically her orchestration of a fake arrest operation against a young man who is simply living his life, were not rooted in any legitimate concern for community safety, but were driven by personal bias and a blatant abuse of power. Our community's trust and our right to live without intimidation have been violated. A heavy silence fell over the room as Johnson continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all sanctions related to this incident, and we will initiate a comprehensive disciplinary review of the practices that allowed such an abuse of authority to occur. Furthermore, we will implement new guidelines to ensure that every resident's rights are fully protected, and that no one, no matter their position, can impose personal vendettas on our community. Her words resonated deeply, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. At that moment, a respected community advocate, a tireless defender of individual rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice echoing with passion. "No resident should be subjected to the tyranny of false law enforcement. Let this hearing mark the turning point, a clear signal that Cedar Heights values truth, justice, and the inalienable right to live free from intimidation. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every infringement on our rights is met with swift and decisive action." His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting everyone in a powerful call for reform. Following his address, a senior officer from the local police department presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert analysis, and official statements that confirmed the imposter's lack of authority and validated our claims. The evidence was irrefutable. The attempted arrest was nothing more than a sham, orchestrated by an overzealous enforcer. The Internal Affairs panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Johnson concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Heights, a community where every resident's rights are respected and where public power is exercised with fairness and integrity." Our vote today is not just about reversing an unjust incident. It is a resounding declaration that we will protect our freedoms and stand united against any abuse of power. Together, we stand for justice, accountability, and the right to live without fear of arbitrary intimidation. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and dignity. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and a unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Heights. The days of fake enforcers and personal vendettas were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Heights underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded sanctions and sweeping reforms implemented by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and social networks, sparking fervent debates about community governance, individual rights, and the importance of standing up against abuse of power. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Heights" and "Community United for Justice," celebrated the decisive action taken to protect every resident's right to live without intimidation. Hashtags like #NoMoreFakeEnforcers and #JusticeForAll trended widely, reinforcing the community's resolve to defend its freedoms. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and to envision a future where personal expression and the right to a safe, secure home were paramount. Neighbors who had long felt oppressed by arbitrary fines and invasive tactics now spoke passionately about their right to control their own lives. "Our community is about freedom, not fear," one resident declared at a crowded meeting, his voice resonating through the hall. The atmosphere was electric, a promise that Cedar Heights would always stand up for its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local law enforcement, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, introduced comprehensive training programs focused on ethical conduct and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint was handled fairly and that no resident would ever again be subjected to the whims of personal vendettas. "Our duty is to protect the rights of every member of our community," Lieutenant Reed affirmed in a follow-up press conference, reinforcing the commitment to justice. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations mobilized further, organizing workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns to empower residents and highlight the importance of standing up against arbitrary enforcement. When we unite, our voices are powerful enough to reshape our community, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to join the movement for change. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and transformative. My decision to defend my son, and by extension, the rights of every Cedar Heights resident, became a symbol of resistance against those who sought to abuse their power. The digital evidence that exposed the sham of the fake HOA enforcers resonated with countless individuals who had long been silenced by fear. Together, we proved that when truth and community unite, no injustice can stand. Karen Miller, once the formidable enforcer of arbitrary rules, was now a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when the community rises in unison. Her influence dwindled as records of her past transgressions were laid bare, underscoring the need for reform and a new era of fairness. At a final celebratory event held in Cedar Heights Central Park, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the golden glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Justice" was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary rule enforcement, a victory for every resident who dares to stand up for their rights, Councilwoman Johnson proclaimed, her voice firm and resolute. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our freedoms. As each new day dawned over Cedar Heights, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how fake HOA enforcers tried to arrest my son, only to be thwarted by the unwavering spirit of a community united behind the law, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that justice and individual freedom should never be compromised. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Cedar Heights, truth, justice, and the right to live without fear would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Heights would forever be a place where integrity, creativity, and respect for individual freedom shone as brightly as the dawn.